It is so it is so fitting that we have this program to honor his legacy at the library, because he was an avid reader. He valued not only books and reading, he valued libraries. He was a champion for the Library Services and Construction Act, which helped many, many libraries when that act was in place. And I know, because I directed several libraries and we were beneficiaries of that particular act. So I'm deeply grateful for his championing reading and libraries. Before we begin today's program, I would like to invite the students, also known as the Boy Tie Club, from Henry B. Gonzalez Elementary School. They will be leading us on the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much for that inspirational pledge. And what a way to start today's program. I would like to welcome and thank our special guests who will be speaking in today's program. I'll start with Councilwoman Char Gonzalez, representing District 5, the Honorable Roland Gutierrez, the Honorable Joaquin Castro, the Honorable Charles Gonzalez, Steve Sheppard, Dean of St. Mary's School of Law, and of course our board chair, the chair of the Library Board of Trustees, Paul Stahl. I would also like to recognize the students here from St. Mary's School of Law who are filming today's program for a special video about Henry B. Gonzalez. We look forward to seeing the final product later on this year. This whole idea of having the program today, not only because it would have been Henry B. Gonzalez's 100th birthday, but when Jean Rodriguez and Honorable Charles Gonzalez approached the library about this idea of having a program to honor the legacy of Henry B. Gonzalez, I thought it was quite fitting that we should do it, because again, as I indicated earlier, he was a big champion of libraries and was an avid reader. We will, in addition to the program today, there will be a program this evening at UTSA. Then we will, during National Hispanic Heritage Month in September, October of this year, we will also be honoring his legacy through different programs throughout the library system. And then in November, we traditionally have an altar here for Dia de los Muertos, and we will be honoring Henry B. Gonzalez with that altar at the Central Library in November. So I wanted to let you know what else we're doing to, again, honor his legacy. I would like to recognize several folks here, friends and supporters of the library. I'll start with Ann Van Pelt, former chair of the Land and Gardens Conservancy. I understand she's here. There's Ann. Thank you, Ann, for being here. Mr. Roberto Anguiano, who is the founding president of the Friends of the Mission Library, also a former trustee of SAWS and a community leader, and has done so much for the mission community, and was honored this Saturday by Councilwoman Villagran and the Library Board of Trustees Chair Paul Stahl. We also have Tracy Bennett, President and CEO of the San Antonio Public Library Foundation. They provide a lot of support for the library. So Tracy, thank you for being here. Alex Briseño, former city manager, was supposed to be here. I don't see him. Well, if he comes in, wanted to acknowledge him. This evening, again, as I indicated earlier, the UTSA Office for Community Services and the College of Public Policy will host a panel discussion about the historic impact of Henry B. Gonzalez on politics and public policy. We're fortunate to have an elite panel or guests that will be speaking and celebrating the legacy of Henry B. Gonzalez. So we have elected leaders and other distinguished leaders in the community. So I'll start with Councilwoman Char Gonzalez, who has championed libraries as soon as she came into office. Big champion for not only the libraries in her district, but libraries throughout the community. And it's my pleasure to invite her to the podium at this time. Councilwoman.
Thank you, and it is such an honor to be here with so many distinguished guests. We all have a personal story about Henry B. Gonzalez. And so my father was also Henry Gonzalez. No relation, but they lived on the same street at one time. And so Dad would often get Henry's mail, and so they, of course, knew each other very well because they would go to each other's homes and exchange the mail because they would often get the wrong one. And so while my father was not heavily politically involved, the one person who he always supported, and when he ever talked about politics at all, it was always about Henry B. Gonzalez and his commitment to the community and its residents. And of course, his legacy still lives with us today in his ability to always connect with his constituents. And I know I often regret the fact that we have so much social media now and so many ways to interact with people, texting, that we don't have the one-on-one contact that we know that he did, and he always and his constituents always appreciated his efforts to get to know them on a one-on-one basis. So on behalf of the City of San Antonio, I have a proclamation that I'll read now. Whereas Henry B. Gonzalez, born May 3rd, 1916, was a former United States Congressman, Texas State Senator, and San Antonio City Councilman, native San Antonian, and much loved and respected citizen of the Alamo City. And whereas Congressman Henry Gonzalez enjoyed a long and distinguished career in public service, served the 20th Congressional District with dedication, courage, and tenacity, and took stands on issues that impacted not only his constituents, but the nation as a whole. And whereas during his 37 years in the House of Representatives, Congressman Gonzalez devoted his energy to protecting the interests of the people of San Antonio and Bexar County, and was involved in supporting a wide range of legislation, such as urban development, federal employees, education, civil rights, and equal opportunity. One of the most significant accomplishments was a series of public laws he authored, making it possible for San Antonio to hold a World's Fair, Hemisphere 68. And whereas Congressman Gonzalez strongly believed in our country's ideals of liberty, freedom, and equality, the respect of the United States of America and its laws, and his strong moral convictions continue to serve as outstanding examples of our generation and future generations to strive to emulate. And whereas over the next year, commemorative events are scheduled that will pay tribute to the late Congressman for the historical impact and legacy of service he leaves upon our city. Now, therefore, I, Ivy R. Taylor, Mayor of the City of San Antonio, in recognition thereof, do hereby proclaim May 2016 through May 2017 to be the HBG 100-Year Centennial Tribute Year in San Antonio, Texas. In here in witness, I have therefore to set my hand, cause the seal of the City of San Antonio to be affixed to this 3rd day of May. Mayor Ivy R. Taylor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gonzalez. So next on the program is the Honorable Roland Gutierrez, Texas House of Representatives, District 119. But before I invite him to the podium, I want to again acknowledge bringing the Mission Library to the Mission community. When State Representative Gutierrez was council member for District 3, he worked very hard to transform that drive-in into what is now is the home of the Mission Branch Library, will soon be the mission of a YMCA, and an improved marquee, and it's just a major destination for that community, and it's making a huge difference. So thank you, and I wanted to thank you publicly for that role.
Thank you, Anita. I appreciate that. We had quite a fight there, but we got it done. And it was, in large part, I want to thank the Gonzalez family, Charlie, and all his siblings for letting us do this for you today. My experience with your father was very, very, it was just a moment in time. It was, I was a young political science major at UTSA, and he was giving one of many speeches. And what I remember just from my memory is just, it was a great speech, and I thought, man, this is a really nice guy, except most people thought he was a really nice guy, except for the guy at Earl Abels. But he deserved it. He deserved it. But that's the kind of guy that Henry B. Gonzalez was for us. He was a fighter. And at that time we had, if you go back in the 70s, we had the Raza Unida party, and they were fighting. And Henry Gonzalez was on a different divergent track than the Raza Unida party, not against one another, just doing that same fight against the system, one person within a group of people out here. And both believing in the same thing, which is fighting for Latinos and Latino causes and equality and education and making sure that we had an opportunity, right? And so, I'm doing this for Trey today in large part, because he asked me to be here and do this resolution today. But it really is something that we all have a great gratitude and a debt of thanks for Henry B. Gonzalez and his family. Because, as Trey said during his last campaign, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I can't think of anybody more giant than Henry B. Gonzalez. I can't think of a person that fought for Latino causes more than this man, and that fought for equality in our community. My other experience with Henry B. Gonzalez is with my dear friend Tom Daniels. And Tommy, his parents, his father, God rest in peace, John Daniels, passed away last year, have a beach house that down in Port Aransas, and every now and then I get invited to it. It's full of all these beautiful pictures. And I see pictures of John Daniels in the Oval Office with Lyndon Johnson and Henry B. Gonzalez and Bill Sinkin, all in the Oval Office. And I'm thinking, what are these people doing there? And it's not just one meeting, because you see them in different suits. So they were there again with the President Johnson, and they were fighting not just for all of the things that are important to Latinos, but they were fighting for hemisphere. And what hemisphere means today to us is so important, because it shaped our downtown community. It shaped the future of this city. And it put us on a path to make us a truly remarkable, unique, independent city, unlike many others in the United States. And so that was the kind of fighter that he was. And if you go back later in his career, when he said we should impeach Ronald Reagan, he's probably right. That guy lied to us. And so I probably shouldn't be talking about those things, but at the end of the day, that was Henry B. Gonzalez. He was a fighter for all things right. He was a fighter for all things just. He was a fighter for Latinos. He was a fighter for making sure that we had equality and education. And so, anyway, to me, I want to thank him for giving us that opportunity, and thank his family. Because as I've talked to Charlie in the past and Henry, I know that he wasn't around that much. He was always working. Like my dad, he passed away last year. He was just a guy that was always working, because that was in their heart, their work ethic. And that was all our parents, wasn't it? And so to that, Charlie, thank you very much. And if you give me this opportunity to read this resolution for you, it's a little bit of history for you. Whereas May 3rd, 2016 marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of the Honorable Henry B. Gonzalez, the first Hispanic U.S. Congressman from Texas and a towering figure in state and national politics. And whereas an Alamo City native, Mr. Gonzalez graduated from San Antonio College and St. Mary's University School of Law. He served in military intelligence during World War II as a civilian cable and radio censor. After joining the Bexar County Juvenile Court, he effected reforms to the juvenile justice system and rose to become chief probation officer. And whereas Mr. Gonzalez won election to the San Antonio City Council in '53 and served as mayor pro tem for part of his first term, he advocated successfully for the desegregation of public facilities and exercised careful fiscal management in order to fund key services and avert utility rate hikes. In 1956, he became the first Mexican-American elected to the Texas Senate. And he distinguishes himself as a champion for civil rights, teaming with Abraham Kazin on a 36-hour filibuster that killed 8 bills fostering racial segregation. And whereas in a 1961 special election, the voters of the U.S. House District 20 chose Mr. Gonzalez to represent them in Washington over the next 37 years, he worked tirelessly on their behalf, providing crucial support to the 1968 Hemisphere and other projects that boosted economic development. He benefited his fellow Americans in numerous leadership roles, including as chair of the Banking Committee and of influential subcommittees, and he supported vital legislation related to such issues as fair housing, equal opportunity, public libraries, small business credit access, and flood insurance and financial system reform. In recognition of his accomplishments, he received numerous high accolades, among them the 1994 John F. Kennedy Library Foundation Profile and Courage Award and the B'nai B'rith National Humanitarian Award. But to his constituents, he was always simply known as their own Henry B. And whereas ill health forced Representative Gonzalez to retire in 1998 and he passed away in November of 2000, his enormous legacy has continued to resonate in the years since. However, and his example of integrity, determination, and unyielding devotion to public service remains a source of inspiration to all. Therefore, be it resolved that the 100th birthday of Henry B. Gonzalez be commemorated and that all Texans be encouraged to learn more about his contributions to our state and to our nation.
Thank you, Representative Gutierrez. Next on the program is an individual that used his leadership role to promote early literacy, to promote reading, first as state representative and now as congressman. He started a book drive with the goal of gathering books to give books to those students and children that were in need. So he's been a big champion for education, for reading, and for early literacy. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podium the Honorable Joaquin Castro, House of Representatives, 20th Congressional District of Texas.
Good morning. And I want to say, first of all, thank you, Ramiro, and everybody at the City of San Antonio and the San Antonio Public Library for celebrating Henry B. Gonzalez's 100th anniversary, and most especially for honoring his legacy in San Antonio and in South Texas. I said before I was elected to this office, and many times since, that there is no more prestigious name in South Texas politics and more honored name than the Gonzalez name. And I believe that. It was true then and it's true now. You know, I have the honor of representing the 20th Congressional District, and I always say that it is the main San Antonio district, even though, as Roland knows, a few years ago, downtown was stripped out of it. The Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center was taken out of the district, and so now it's a big chunk of the west side and the south side and almost all of Northwest Bexar County. But Henry B. Gonzalez's imprint on the neighborhoods of the district lives on. You know, since I got to Congress a few years ago, succeeding Charlie, who was there for about 14 years, I've had the opportunity to talk with many of the longstanding members of Congress, people like John Dingell, who was elected in the 1950s, and John Conyers from Michigan, who was elected shortly after that, Henry Waxman, people that served with your dad for such a long time. And every time I mention his name, it puts a smile on their face because they remember what an incredible person he was. And many times, Nancy Pelosi, who was the first female speaker of the House of Representatives in American history and who is now the Democratic minority leader, has said in mixed company, and by mixed company I mean not just San Antonians, but people from other parts of the nation, that Henry B. Gonzalez was the person with the most integrity that she came across of the people that she served with in Congress. When she started out as a freshman Congress member from San Francisco, Henry was her chairman in the Banking Committee in the 1980s. And when the House of Representatives was hit with the tough news about the scandal, it was your dad who was the face of integrity who stood up for Congress at that time. And so, as we think back about his history, you think back about the period in which he served, in which he started his career in San Antonio. And those of you that are more senior to me, people like Dr. Elizondo and many others who are here, you live this, but I want to walk us down just a second what it was like for Henry and his contemporaries. You were talking at that time about a city that was still racially and ethnically segregated. He grew up in an era where there were still signs that read, "No dogs or Negroes or Mexicans allowed." He ran for office at a time where there were no single-member districts. There was no District 5 or District 7 or District 1. It was a very anti-competitive system that was dominated by many folks on one side of town with powerful interests. It was not a system that was apt to change just because you asked it to. And that's why I think it required somebody whose personality was of a fighter, who could be thorny, somebody who had a strong voice, who was part of a team, but was also an independent and a maverick, somebody who inspired people. That was Henry B. Gonzalez. And so last week I had a speech put into the congressional record, Charlie, for you and your family. And I know that we've had a few proclamations, and I just want to read the first and last paragraph for you. It says, "Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, a treasured son of San Antonio and legendary Latino leader. May 3rd of this year marks the 100th anniversary of Congressman Gonzalez's birth, a milestone I look forward to celebrating with his family and the broader San Antonio community. Henry B. Gonzalez's legacy has been a guiding light throughout my career, and it's an honor to serve in the seat he once filled as the current representative for Texas's 20th Congressional District. I offer my best wishes to his family and to the entire San Antonio community as we take time on this anniversary to celebrate his illustrious life." Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Castro. Our next speaker has carried on Henry B. Gonzalez's legacy and followed in his political footsteps. The Honorable Charles Gonzalez, son of Henry B. Gonzalez, and former House of Representative, 20th Congressional District of Texas, took over for his father when he retired from Congress in 1998. It's my pleasure to invite him to the podium.
Thank you. Ramiro, first, sincere thanks from the entire family for what the San Antonio Public Library is doing and has been doing. I think when we first met, I explained Dad's love of reading and for books. And for the students from the Henry B. Gonzalez Elementary, thank you very much for being here. He would have been so proud of you and what you're doing today, but he'd be prouder if you went back and even read more than you do today and visited libraries every week. And to Principal Mario Goff, thank you for your dedication as a principal. I know what you're doing at the school. I know members of the family will be visiting you there later. There's so many people that we would have to thank, and of course everyone that has spoken in the proclamations. Thank you for your public service, because believe me, there are people in this audience, and yours truly, that understands the sacrifice. Not that the public is going to appreciate it as much, and the truth is, if people are lined up to take your job, so as soon as you indicate you're a little tired or whatever, people are announcing they're going to run against you. So I caution you against any public remarks. Members of the family that are here, I know that my nephew Henry III is here. My nieces Margot and Pilar are here. Margot's infant son, Ridge, is here. And I think Paul Huckabee, who is married to Margot, is also here. I don't know if there are other members of the family that are present, and I apologize if I missed them, but I actually believe that they may be at the San Fernando Cemetery visiting Dad's grave. I know that they had planned that earlier. I look out and I see so many faces that made such a difference in Dad's life, and I know that he made a difference in your life. Dr. Elizondo, Roy Barrera Sr., God bless you. Gene Rodriguez, whose master's thesis at St. Mary's was all about Dad, covering Dad's life up to about 1965, which would have to have been the most exciting years of his life. And there are others, and I apologize if I don't recognize everybody at this time, but you know how much we appreciate what you did for Dad and made his career possible. Dad would have been the first one to tell you that there was no way he could have done any of what he accomplished alone. It's just not done that way. And I know that, you heard Hillary Clinton once said it takes a village, and she was exactly right. And Dad was trying to say that some time ago about the sense of community and what we need to be doing for one another. I did not prepare any comments or remarks, but I do want to also acknowledge Dean Sheppard and Professor Van Hoy, who are here from St. Mary's University and the School of Law, that will have their own project that the Dean will be talking about. UTSA, as Ramiro has already alluded to, will be doing something tonight. If Dad was alive and he was still in Congress, and I don't know, Joaquin, you may ask some people, but most folks are actually gone that experienced those great parties. So Dad would have his birthday party, but it was also Cinco de Mayo party. And when they built the Rayburn building in around 64, 65, whatever it was, the big courtyard, that's where they would have the annual party. And it was big. And it was really special because Dad would bring in all the mariachis and he'd bring all the Mexican food and he'd have this great party. And back then when we had breweries, he also had Lone Star beer and Pearl and everything else. But the amazing thing was everyone was invited. So when I got to Congress in '99, that was the thing that people would tell me. And when I say people, I'm talking about whether it was maintenance or janitors or wait staff or cooks. They were all invited to Dad's party along with the Vice President, members of Congress, and the Senate. And everybody would just be mingling at this huge Cinco de Mayo birthday celebration. Well, that's what made Dad so special. And I would have people stop me and they would, and I'm not talking about fellow members of Congress, but they would say, your dad took such an interest in what was going on in my life. My aunt needed help, he would help. And Dad would actually stop and inquire. So how's your aunt doing? Or how's it going? You're having difficulties with your job. That was just his nature. And I think that's what made him such a special public official. That birthday party, I didn't even try to do anything that was similar because it would have paled in comparison because it was of, I would say, it was legend at some point, and you just leave legends alone. Dad's public life, and I went in it on 2 points, is he really believed you change lives one life at a time. And that's why he had that personal interest. I see Eloy here, and I see Ruben, who worked for my dad. I forget how many years together you guys have, probably 60, that worked with Dad and with me. And they will tell you, I don't know what Dad would have done with the electronic age, because he had to read and sign every letter that went out of the office. So I don't know what he would have done with email. I have no idea how he would have made it really personal, because he put PSs on everybody's letters and such. But it was really important because that was a constituent, someone that took the time to communicate, and he felt he had to be just as personal in the response. And it became impossible at some point in time. But he always, I could tell you stories that were hilarious. As kids, he would come in late at night, and there'd be boxes of letters, and he'd be signing them. So it's midnight, and he would get us to take the mail to the main post office. He's wanted to make sure that it was going to get delivered as soon as possible. We'd say, Dad, you probably can take this in the morning, and it's going to get there at the same time. Take it now, and we'd go downtown and stuff those things in there. But that's the kind of man that he was. If we fast forward to today, and I'll end it with this. Dad could be stubborn, and when he believed in something, it was pretty much over. There were 2 things he did not believe in, and that was, one was that there was no such thing as separate but equal, and not to exclude yourself. Be proud about many things that make you an individual. Do not exclude yourself from the great opportunities that this country presents. Which leads me to my last point. Dad did not unite people by making them angry. Dad did not unite people by making them scared. That's not the way he got elected. He went out there and he pointed those things that needed to be corrected to improve the lives of all individuals, but not to give up hope and to continue to strive to achieve those things. That's what united people. It was hope, and there was a plan to carry it all out. And Dad was a revolutionary, don't get me wrong. He had that side of him. But deep down, I think he understood that lasting change was always evolutionary and took a little bit longer. And that's why he believed in the state legislature, and Joaquin, why he believed in the legislative process, and surely why he loved city council. Because you got to have the policy, but you got to make sure that the policy actually accomplishes all the things that you guys are doing there day in and day out. So again, I just want to say thanks to everyone that is making this day possible and the remembrance of Dad, but I hope it's not just going to be a remembrance, but that it will inspire people to follow in his footsteps and be public officials. And if you can't be a public official, just be a darn good citizen, because it was always about caring about one another. Thank you very much, Ramiro.
Thank you, Charlie, for sharing that special insight to your father's life. As I mentioned earlier, students from St. Mary's School of Law are here filming today's program. Henry B. Gonzalez graduated from St. Mary's University School of Law in 1943. Here to share more about this video project is Steve Sheppard, Dean of St. Mary's School of Law.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Good morning. I was told I'd be following Charlie, and I tried to get out of it, but they said, no, really, you're doing the work and you have to do it. But it's tough following Charlie Gonzalez, a personality that we know, a man that we all, I think, appreciate for many, many reasons, but also a person who tells a story that tugs at you. It's not that he hollers at your brain alone, but he also talks to the heart. And so I'm going to try and do that very briefly. First, I want to thank the library. I want to thank Councilwoman. It is humbling for me, but as the Dean of the Law School, I realize it's very appropriate that the Dean of San Antonio's Law School should be here today honoring Henry B. Gonzalez and asking for your help. Don't worry, Mr. Barrera, I'm not after making that type of help today, but I am asking for special help that only many of you can give. Especially for the people who are not contemporaries of Congressman Gonzalez and the people who knew him, I want you to think for a moment about courage. You've heard a lot about Congressman Henry Gonzalez's leadership, his integrity. Sometimes these words are hard to know when you're young, but one you do know is courage. The courage to stand up and do something when people are telling you, no, that's not for you. The courage to do what you know is right, even though on the playground people are saying, no, you should do this instead. You may have to get older in order to know what it means to say the president should be impeached. But today you already know what it is to stand alone and say, I want to do this, and I know that it's right, I should do it. And too many people are telling you no. Because the law school is very proud of a very skinny young man with a lot of hair. And I want you to think about what his life would have been like in 1940 and 1939, when as a young man in a very different world in San Antonio, a world that did not, like today, have so many leaders who come from families of a Mexican heritage in America, to lead the Congress, to lead the city, to lead the library, which here is, I think, more important than any of those things. A world in which, if you weren't born of families from Northern Europe, it was very rare for you to have opportunity. This makes no sense, but that's how it was in 1939 and in 1940, when a young college graduate said, I want to go to law school. And Henry B. Gonzalez went to St. Mary's School of Law and said, I would like to become a lawyer. And I have to tell you, in the 1940s, it was very rare for any law school, certainly not any owned by the state of Texas, to admit a person who was called a Mexican or from a Mexican family. And I am proud of St. Mary's for admitting a talented man, a brilliant man, who would become such a leader as Henry B. Gonzalez. And when he graduated in 1943, he immediately went into government service. And as soon as the war was over, he took his first legal job here in San Antonio, in Bexar County, as a parole officer. His first public job was serving individuals, helping those in need, helping those people who needed help getting back on their feet. The same endeavors he would carry through a life of international notoriety in service. So it's only natural when I became dean and I realized that we have a Centennial coming soon to the law school, that we should begin telling our story, but our story isn't the story of a bunch of bricks. It is the story of a bunch of books, but not of bricks. But more importantly, it is the story of people. And there are certain people, like our graduate Henry B. Gonzalez, who have changed the world. Sometimes they've done it in the newspapers and in legislation, and sometimes they've done it because they stayed up late at night in order to save one person from losing a house, or to help one person to leave incarceration when it was their time and not to be kept late. It was necessary for each and every one of these people to go through law school and enter into the practice of law, and now we need to tell those stories better. And so St. Mary's is beginning a system of St. Mary's Law Stories. Individuals whose stories have been evocative of all of our lawyers, all of our alumni, in helping to change the lives of others for the better. And the very first of these that we've been working on for the last year is the story of Henry B. Gonzalez. Charlie has been very, very helpful in helping us identify ways forward. And what we've decided to do, given that there are some nice programs already put together, is to build a collection of oral histories that we'll videograph so that we'll be able to collect the stories of people now as they remember their intersections, their lives, the contributions made in their world, and the contributions made by them to Henry B. Gonzalez. So I see Mr. Barrera and others who I'm very, very keen to tell a very fulsome tale, and we will archive all of these individual histories in the St. Mary's Law Library in our new archive. We're working with the really well-known public historian on our history faculty, Professor Teresa Van Hoy, and after the public part of this ceremony is over, if you would like to contribute, if even as the councilwoman said at the very beginning, Councilwoman Gonzalez, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Gonzalez says, and I have it exactly right, every one of us has a story about Henry B. Gonzalez. We want to capture those stories. We want to get them all in whole about you and about him, and then we want to be able to assemble this great montage with some of the public record and tell that story anew so that all of us, all of that village, are a part of this tremendous achievement that is the legacy of Henry B. Gonzalez. So many of you have received the Save the Date card. We are going to spend this year collecting these stories and creating this grand episode. And if you'll see Professor Van Hoy afterward, you'll not only get your Save the Date card, but if you'd be willing to work with us anytime over the next year so we could capture your story, it would be an honor for St. Mary's to be able to house it. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you, Dean Sheppard. We look forward to seeing the final project. And if the library can partner with you in any way, we have a large footprint in the community. We have many branch libraries. And perhaps some of the libraries can be a meeting place for these interviews and oral histories. Our last speaker in the program is the chair of the San Antonio Public Library Board of Trustees, Paul Stahl, who's a great supporter of our work, of staff, and a great leader on the library board. Without his support, we couldn't offer the programs that we offer today and enlighten you with those programs. Paul?
Thank you, Romero. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the San Antonio Public Library Board of Trustees. It is clear that Henry B. has inspired many of us here in the room and many people throughout the San Antonio community. It's also clear from what we've heard today that the face of San Antonio owes an immense gratitude to Henry B. I don't think any of us could imagine what San Antonio would be like if it weren't for his leadership, his tenacity. All the qualities that made him great shine through in what we now see as a fantastic blooming city. So, as Ramiro mentioned, Henry B. believed in fairness and equality. These beliefs are also the same as the core mission of the San Antonio Library, to offer free and equal access to information for all citizens. Henry B., although I didn't know him, I might add, no offense, but in this sea of suits, this morning I said, I'm going to wear my Wayavera. I know he loved them, and so I'm kind of wearing that in his honor. But he understood that the best foundation for a strong, not just community of San Antonio, but a nation, is the elevation and liberation of the individual through literacy and education. That ideal is what really he championed. I think it really at the core of so much of his endeavors. So, during the months of September and October, the San Antonio Public Library celebrates National Hispanic Heritage Month. This year, in honor of the centennial celebration of Henry B. Gonzalez, we will be developing and hosting programs that shine a light on his life and legacy and the impact he made on the San Antonio community and on politics and public policy. We will also be dedicating our annual Dia de los Muertos altar to the late Congressman. I encourage everyone to keep an eye on our website, mysapl.org, for other details. I'd also like to thank, of course, our speakers, all those in the audience that came today for this special occasion. I hope everyone has an opportunity to attend tonight's program at UTSA, or if you're not able to make it, you can stream it live on nowcastsa.com. And we also hope you'll take a few moments to enjoy some refreshments and to view the wonderful display that our Central Library Texas Genealogy Department and staff has put together. So, I think it's really fitting and beautiful, and I appreciate you giving us the honor to host this morning event for your father. To have this in the library, a building that I know he loved and that he wanted to see as many of them around as possible. Just thank you for allowing us to participate in this honor for your father. Thank you, everyone.
All right, that concludes the program. I'd like to thank all of you one more time for being here. We have refreshments, so please stay, and we have lots of folks with lots of stories of Henry B. Gonzalez. Thank you all for coming.